The August 2025 Myanmar Junta bombing, Law Kha Hlo Massacre. On the morning of August 17, 2025, the quiet landscapes of Karenni State were shaken by an event that would be etched into Myanmar's tragic history. In the village of Law Kha Hlo, nestled in the mineral-rich highlands, life had followed its usual rhythm. Families went about their morning routines, children played near homes, and workers prepared for another day in the mines. But by the afternoon, the community was left in ruins. The Myanmar Air Force launched a devastating aerial assault, one of the deadliest of the year, killing 24 civilians and injuring more than 30 others. This was not merely another episode in the long conflict that has gripped the nation since the military coup of 2021. It was a massacre that laid bare the brutality of the junta's strategy, the helplessness of civilians, and the failure of the international community to protect them. The first wave of attack. The first signal of disaster struck at 7:45 in the morning. A Myanmar fighter aircraft, identified by witnesses as a Yak-13, swooped down from the skies above Law Kha Hlo. It released a 500-pound bomb that fell on an old hospital building located near the edge of the village. The hospital, no longer in use but remembered by locals as a symbol of survival and resilience, crumbled under the force of the explosion. 2 nearby residents sustained injuries from the blast. The message was unmistakable. Even structures associated with care and health were not safe from the military's wrath. For the villagers, the destruction of the hospital seemed like a warning, but they had little time to respond. Families remained in their homes, children returned to play, and miners prepared to work. By noon, however, it became clear that the morning strike had been only a grim prelude to something far more catastrophic. The Sanoon bombing. At around 12 o'clock, as the day's labor was in full swing, another jet circled above Law Kha Hlo. This time, the weapon dropped was larger and deadlier. The bomb landed on a cluster of homes in the residential heart of the village. Within seconds, the neighborhood was obliterated. 24 civilians were killed instantly, their lives cut short in a storm of fire, debris, and smoke. Among the victims were women and children, individuals who had never borne arms but were caught in the crossfire of a war they had never chosen. More than 30 others were badly injured, many suffering burns, shrapnel wounds, and fractures. Survivors stumbled out of the rubble, crying out for loved ones, desperately searching through ruins that only hours earlier had been homes filled with laughter and daily routines. The second strike transformed Law Kha Hlo from a functioning community into a landscape of grief and devastation. Who were the victims? The victims of the Law Kha Hlo bombing were ordinary civilians. The majority worked in the mining industry, which sustained the local economy through the extraction of antimony, tungsten, tin, and copper. Families depended on these resources for their livelihoods, and the mines represented one of the few economic opportunities available in Karenni State. Unlike military bases or resistance strongholds, Law Kha Hlo was a civilian hub. There were no active armed operations within the village on that day. Witnesses, human rights groups, and local Karenni army personnel confirmed that the strikes deliberately targeted areas with no military presence. The choice of target made the massacre an act of collective punishment, designed to terrorize communities and punish regions seen as sympathetic to resistance movements. A pattern of violence. The Law Kha Hlo massacre did not occur in isolation. It was the continuation of a bloody pattern that has characterized Myanmar since the coup of February 2021. The junta has repeatedly relied on air power to exert dominance over regions that resist its control. Schools, temples, hospitals, and marketplaces have all been targeted in similar assaults. In Karenni State alone, local groups recorded at least 10 separate air raids in the months preceding the August 17th bombing. Each of these incidents displaced families, destroyed infrastructure, and increased the already dire humanitarian crisis. Similar tragedies were reported in Sagaing, Chin, and Mandalay, where airstrikes erased the line between combatants and civilians. The junta's military doctrine has increasingly resembled a scorched earth strategy. Instead of isolating and fighting armed resistance forces, the army treats entire communities as hostile zones. The use of heavy aerial bombardment ensures that resistance fighters, if present at all, are indistinguishable from the civilians they live among. This approach guarantees widespread destruction, creating conditions that drive entire populations into displacement. Humanitarian consequences. Myanmar's internal displacement crisis has reached catastrophic levels. By mid-2025, more than 3.5 million citizens had been forced from their homes due to aerial strikes, raids, and scorched earth operations. Entire villages have vanished from maps, leaving behind only ruins and scattered survivors. In Law Khao Hlo, the bombing disrupted not only lives, but also livelihoods. The mining operations, already unstable due to frequent attacks, were forced to shut down. Families who relied on wages from mining found themselves without income, while displaced survivors scrambled to find shelter and food. Humanitarian groups attempting to provide aid faced significant obstacles. Military checkpoints, restricted access, and the threat of further strikes made it nearly impossible to deliver food, medical supplies, or trauma care to those who needed it most. The psychological toll was equally devastating. Survivors described the sound of approaching aircraft as a source of paralyzing terror. For children especially, the trauma of living under constant threat of bombing has left deep scars. Education is disrupted, and the very notion of a secure childhood has been stolen from them. International response. As reports of the Law Khao Hlo massacre circulated, international condemnation was immediate but largely symbolic. Rights groups and humanitarian agencies renewed calls for an arms embargo on Myanmar. They urged powerful nations to halt the supply of weapons and technology to the junta, emphasizing that foreign support directly enabled the strikes. Of particular concern was the role of Chinese firms. Reports in July 2025 confirmed that Chinese companies were supplying the junta not only with finished aerial bombs, but also with the technology to manufacture such weapons domestically. These revelations underscored the complicity of international actors in perpetuating the conflict. Despite strong words, no concrete measures were taken to restrict the junta's capacity for violence. The United Nations remained paralyzed by political divisions. Neighboring countries, wary of destabilization, refrained from direct intervention. The people of Law Khao Hlo, like millions of other Myanmar civilians, were left without meaningful protection. The domestic outcry. Within Myanmar, anger and sorrow erupted following the bombing. Social media platforms such as Twitter and Facebook became channels for sharing images of the aftermath. Survivors posted photos of crumbled homes, bloodied survivors, and rows of bodies wrapped for burial. Hashtags calling for international justice trended among resistance sympathizers. The junta, meanwhile, maintained strict control over state-run media, either ignoring the bombing altogether or attempting to portray it as a legitimate strike against resistance elements. Independent journalists, operating under immense risk, worked tirelessly to document the truth. Many of them relied on underground networks to smuggle photographs, testimonies, and videos to international outlets. For resistance groups like the Karenni Army, the attack became further proof of the junta's disregard for civilian lives. Leaders of these groups issued statements condemning the strikes and pledging to intensify their struggle. But for civilians, retaliation offered little comfort. What they demanded was protection and an end to the indiscriminate bombings. The information war. The Law Khao Hlo bombing highlighted the growing importance of information in Myanmar's conflict. With the junta controlling most traditional media, the internet has become a battlefield of its own. Platforms such as Twitter and Facebook, once criticized for fueling ethnic violence, now serve as essential tools for resistance and advocacy. Social networks provided a window into the devastation, ensuring that the massacre was not silenced. However, the junta has responded with crackdowns on digital platforms, surveillance of activists, and occasional internet blackouts designed to cut off communication. The struggle to document events like the Law Khao Hlo massacre is therefore not only about truth, but also about survival for those who dare to speak. The struggle for accountability. One of the most troubling aspects of the Law Khao Hlo bombing is the near-total impunity enjoyed by the perpetrators. Human rights organizations have classified such airstrikes as potential war crimes and crimes against humanity. Yet Myanmar's military leaders face no credible threat of prosecution. International mechanisms such as the International Criminal Court remain limited in their ability to intervene without political backing. Efforts to impose sanctions or embargoes often fall short, diluted by geopolitical interests. The result is a cycle in which crimes are documented but rarely punished.